So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I am Dr. Thais Bingham-Hickman, Associate Director of the Leadership Alliance, and it is my privilege to welcome you to our 6th installment of a conversation with the Doctoral Scholar. In these conversations, we feature alumni who have completed their doctoral degree and are fulfilling the mission of the Leadership Alliance as leaders and role models, diversifying the research workforce. This event is a component of the Leadership Alliance Virtual Professional Development Program, a new initiative that the Leadership Alliance partners created to ensure continuity of skill building, networking, and exposure to graduate programs for students from across the country. I'd like to acknowledge and thank my team and colleagues at Brown University, Chaminade University in Honolulu, Weill Cornell Medical College, and Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine for their efforts in helping to create this program. Today's guest speaker is Dr. Edgardo Sanabria-Valenti, Associate Program Director, Pre-Professional Advisor, and Adjunct Professor of Biology. Dr. Edgardo Sanabria-Valenti is the Associate Director of the Program for Research Initiatives in Science and Math at John Jay College of Criminal Justice of the City University of New York. He was a founding member of the NYC Minority Graduate Student Network and is a Leadership Alliance Doctoral Scholar and a life member of the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science. He was an invited speaker at the New York City March for Science in 2018, where he spoke about one of his passions, how equal access to science, both to a science-based education and to the advances of technology and medicine, is a human rights issue. A news and political junkie since the 2008 election, Edgardo is a consulting advisor to the Progressive Democrats of New Jersey, an organization that aims to shake up the Democratic establishment and push for progressive ideals like the Green New Deal and police reform in his new adopted home state. At John Jay, Dr. Sanabria-Valenti leads PRISM's programmatic efforts in addition to serving as a research coordinator for the Department of Sciences and as the Health Careers Advisor for John Jay. He is the PI of a recently renewed $1.75 million New York State Collegiate Science and Technology Entry Program grant, now in its second 5-year cycle. So thank you so much, Dr. Sanabria-Valenti, for joining us. We had the pleasure of spending much time together at NYU, and I am so excited to see you again and to have you today. So thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy that you joined now the leadership of the Leadership Alliance.
Yes, so we have come full circle here. So thank you everyone for joining us. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through some of our student questions that were sent prior to tonight's conversation. And Dr. Sanabria-Valenti is also going to share some information with us as well. So I will start with a few questions. So first, what interested you about your field of study and how did your research interests come about?
Okay, so before I start, I wanted to say, thank all of you guys for coming and to tell you how in awe I am of the amount of effort and the enthusiasm that you guys are putting into your participation in the Leadership Alliance this summer. This is a summer like no other. It's weird, but we're gonna get back at some point to the labs. You guys are going to be able to meet other scientists. You're gonna be able to meet other professionals. So I am I'm very glad that you're all really you're standing up and you're coming, that you're coming here. Okay, so the question was about my field, and you have, I guess, before and after. Right now, my field is science education, but back in the day, it was microbiology. And I got into microbiology in high school. I had our biology teacher actually, I remember one time she raised a Petri dish with all these dots, and she said every one of these dots have millions and millions of cells. And it blew my mind. I was like, how? How can there be millions of cells there? I thought that each of the dots was a bacteria. What is this? And it was been a love affair with the microbial world since then. On my first year of college, actually during orientation week, it was the last day of orientation week at Universidad de Puerto Rico, Mayagüez. All the Boricuas in the house, hello. During orientation week, I went to a talk on the last morning, and they were talking about undergraduate research and how there were several programs, and they were talking about them. And the one thing that caught my mind was, and we take you out to a conference or two every year. Wait a minute, I can travel for free. And since then, I started really looking into it, and I decided to begin, what I started asking was, how do I become a good candidate? How do I make sure that I end up in that program? And that pretty much drove my enthusiasm for science and my enthusiasm for research. I joined a lab as soon as I could. I ended up in the lab of Dr. Mildred Chaparro in Universidad de Puerto Rico, working with isolating bacteria from oysters that I had to go and drive to Cabo Rojo to pick up from the beach. Actually, I hope you guys don't mind, but I have receipts. I brought some pictures. I remember this is my first poster ever from the research that I was working on at the University of Puerto Rico with my lab mate, Marjorie. And as I learn more about research and more about what a researcher does, it really, growing up, I grew up in Puerto Rico. I grew up actually originally in Adjuntas, which is in the center of the island. All my family are coffee farmers. And there was no other scientist. There was no other professional. My mother is the only person in our whole family at that point that had finished college. So there was no one. I thought there was no one to talk science with me. And learning, I had this idea about studying science, but I didn't know what a scientist does. And it was through experiences like the Leadership Alliance, which I did in 2001, that I got to really discover what does a scientist does. At first, I thought it was, well, a scientist, I guess, they play around with pipettes, they play around in the lab, but this experience with the Leadership Alliance allowed me to learn that a scientist really is someone that asks questions and figure out what is the answer. At its core, that's what we do. We are curious about something, we come up with a hypothesis, and we figure out what is a possible way to answer it. And it was the experience with the Leadership Alliance really that made the largest and the biggest change, and was one of the most impactful things in my career. And again, this is the Leadership Alliance 2001, and I'm here in the corner. This was in one of the meals, and I hope that in this next picture, you recognize a certain speaker from last week, Dr. Sarfo. We've known each other since we were undergrads, and we still, since we're both in New York, we still get to talk. I was talking to him this weekend, and he told me, he's like, make sure you read the questions ahead of time. Those questions are good. These kids really know what they're asking. So,
I see Marcus Jones in the picture as well.
Of course, Marcus Jones now at Gentech. And that was my first poster. And my poster during the summer. And I know that, it's frustrating that you're not are able to be in the labs. I get your feeling of not being able to be able to accomplish that much this summer, but please notice that my 2 months could be summarized on a PCR, a gel, and a Western blot. That's all I got to do. That was full 2 summers of research summarized in 3 figures. That's it. So yeah, that's how we ended up sort of falling into research. Originally, my goal was to stay in Puerto Rico and work in the pharma business there, Puerto Rico used to be the largest producer of meds in the US, and it's no longer, but that is in short how I chose my field and how I ended up in research.
Thank you for that. And we have another question that's kind of building upon your experience in Puerto Rico. So this question came in live. She says, hello, as a student from the University of Puerto Rico like yourself, what hardships did you face looking for research experiences being from an island when there isn't much exposure?
Well, as I told you, something that I've learned, I would love to say that my professional life has been well planned and organized, and that my goal was to work some years in industry and then go back into academia. Not really. The way that life works is opportunities happen, opportunities show up. You just have to be ready to take them. I am a total nerd and a geek. So of course I went to every single talk during orientation week, and that's how I found out about the MARC program at Mayagüez. I had the Leadership Alliance went on a recruitment trip to Puerto Rico, and I found a poster, and of course I showed up, and that's where I met Joel Oppenheim, who was the dean at NYU, and I told him I want to go to NYU to do my summer program, and not only did I did that, and through the Leadership Alliance, I also did it in, so it's a matter of being aware of the opportunities and not waiting for them to come to you. Preparing yourself for those opportunities by knowing what are your possibilities, what do you like, what are you good at, and what do you like, what are you good at, so that when those opportunities that are related to that show up, you're ready to grab them. Mm-hmm. In Puerto Rico, I remember the research and the work that we did was would be considered now pretty basic. No PCR, no DNA. It was all about isolating bacteria and counting colonies. And even with that, you have to remember that, again, doing research is really about asking questions. So it doesn't matter how basic they tell you that the research is. It's not about the technique. It's not about really even the results. It's about the opportunity for you to develop your skills in and coming up with questions, figuring out what is the hypothesis, and designing experiments to test them. So look for them. They're out there. You somehow, the person that asked that question found out about the Leadership Alliance. She probably got an email from someone, or she was probably Googling. Google is your best friend. Their opportunities are out there. You just have to find them.
Thank you. And so this is specifically from another student from University of Puerto Rico, but I think it can be applied to anyone coming in from out of state, to a new area. So the question is, as a junior biology student from the University of Puerto Rico at KE, and looking forward to pursuing graduate studies outside of Puerto Rico, what advice would you give to a student like me? And what was the most difficult part for you while adapting to New York and living outside of Puerto Rico in general?
This is, I've been struggling with, there were a few questions like this, and I've been struggling with it. The main reason is there is a peculiarity, particularly right now, of students coming from Puerto Rico. My students in New York, I work at the City University of New York. 90-something% of our students are born and bred New Yorkers. They come from Brooklyn, they come from the Bronx, they come from Queens, they come from Manhattan, they come from Staten Island. And as typical New Yorkers, they believe there's nothing west of the Hudson. So it's New York and then nothing else. So they're always telling me, they say, well, I want to stay here and go to grad school here. What am I going to do out there without my family? And I always tell them, it's like, remember, you're going to go out there for a 2-month summer program, a 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, depends on which program, years of grad school. You can always come back. You can always come back to New York. You can always come back to your family. And in the meantime, you can, that's what phones are for. But you can always visit, you can always, and you will stay in touch. Students coming from Puerto Rico, we know that it's a lot more difficult down there. I remember when I was graduating from UPR, I still have a close group of friends who graduated from UPR in Mayagüez in 2002. And we all did our PhDs or MDs in the East Coast or in Puerto Rico. And throughout those first years, we kept in touch. We tried to visit each other. We built that community for ourselves. And our goal, every single one of us, was we're gonna go out there, we're gonna get the PhD, maybe do the postdoc, and then, you know, the first one that gets into the faculty position in the University of Puerto Rico brings in the rest. But even though we tried, we weren't able to. When I left Puerto Rico almost 20 years ago, there was a big push for development of biotechnology in the West Coast, in Mayagüez and in the Northeast of Puerto Rico. That no longer exists. There's not that big push for it. So employment in STEM for a PhD is not impossible, but it's difficult. So you want to make sure that if your goal is going back, that you really take that into account. And also, to answer more closely the question, the main thing and what was the most difficult was, of course, moving to a city where I barely knew anyone, where I didn't speak the language very well. My accent back then used to be a mile thick. It was when you are most graduate programs, about half of the students, if not more, are also going to be arriving into that town or into that city from somewhere else. So you have a perfect opportunity there to meet a lot of people that are in your same situation. And it's a great way for you to build your own, your own community and your own family. As you saw, Kwame and I, we both did our PhD at NYU. We were roommates in grad school. We ended up having similar career paths. We go out to have a drink or two and pretend we're 25. We're not anymore. Once in a while. Because during that time, you know, we were both, he was from Virginia, I'm from Puerto Rico, our friend Carolina was, who's from Colombia, our friend Kim, who's from New York, our friend Melissa, who is from Louisiana. We're still talking to each other, that experience, so don't be too afraid. You're gonna come into that graduate program, there's gonna be a lot of people in the same situation, don't be shy, particularly if you're Puerto Rican. There's no shy Puerto Ricans. We don't accept. So you want to take advantage of the situation to start building your community and start building your new family over here.
Yeah, and Edgardo, we also had a question specific to basically staying in the United States. So this question comes from another student from the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez and says she wants to continue to stay in the United States after she graduates. What experiences do you recommend to have as a graduate student in order to get into a good college in the United States?
Well, you're doing it. Your participation in the Leadership Alliance is giving you skills and a way to discover how I don't want to call it the business of science, but I'm not saying that it's a business, but how the industry, how academia works. You're getting mentorship, you're getting those opportunities. I don't know, did the student say if are they junior, senior, freshman?
It just says they plan to continue studies. So I am assuming that they are an undergraduate and they want to pursue graduate school here.
Hopefully we will be over the hump with COVID by next summer. So if you have the opportunity to do another summer program, do so. Talk to faculty at your, you said that it was from UPR Mayagüez. I have to say this, antes, ahora y siempre, colegio. Talk to the faculty, ask them, most faculty members at the University of Puerto Rico also have research labs. They don't, we don't have enough faculty, at least back when I was there wasn't enough faculty for them to have that many adjuncts. So most of the classes are taught by faculty that have the research labs. Talk to them. Something that I did, starting on first year, after I saw that opportunity to do research, I made sure that every faculty member knew my name by the end of the class. That I wasn't going to be just some random student. I mean, I didn't care that much. It's not that I was trying to make friends, but that at least they knew who I was, so that I could then have and build relationship with them, because since I started, I was hunting for a lab to join. So start talking to them, ask what are the research interests, what are you doing? Can I shadow one of your graduate students, one of your undergrads? Can I volunteer sometime washing Petri dishes, washing pipettes, whatever it is, so that I can get in the environment? So the best thing you can do is just get there. Don't wait for the opportunity to land in your lab. Go for it, ask, demand the opportunity, but always be polite. But ask for the opportunity, search for the opportunities and find them. Something else you can start doing to prepare for the application process to graduate school is reading papers, understanding the scientific process beyond what they teach you in classes, understanding the language of science, improving your science communication. And I am not necessarily just talking about learning more English. I am talking also about learning how to talk like a scientist, how to communicate at that level. The best way is start reading papers, start reading interviews. Journals have sections where they have the research paper, and then they have commentary. Learn about the brand new things that are going on in your field and in other fields. The other thing that you can do is, something you're doing here right now, is do informational interviews, which is, and this is something to do throughout your career. An informational interview is a tool for you to learn about somebody else's career's path, so that you can potentially get good advice that might apply to you. Not every advice is gonna apply to you. Not everyone's life, not everyone's experience applies to everyone. But by meeting people, asking them about how they got where they are, what does success look like in their profession, in their jobs, how, what are they think are gonna be their next step, what are they doing preparing for them, you can start getting ideas. And you can be ready for when you find that one opportunity that, you know, oh, I remember I talked to this person, that sounds like that, I'm gonna apply. Mm-hmm. And finally, the last advice is never self-exclude. We always, with imposter syndrome gets to us, gets to everyone. And we always think, oh, that's program. No, they're only gonna get the smart ones. They're always only gonna get the students that are better than me. They're not gonna get me. Apply. The worst thing that can happen is you don't get in. The best thing that can happen, you end up in the program. You end up being able to take advantage of that opportunity. So never self-exclude.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a number of questions and comments on imposter syndrome, actually. One of them just came in. So this question is, what is one piece of advice you would give to students who struggle with it? If you experienced it during your personal journey, how did you deal with it?
You are here for a reason. I'm gonna look directly at the person that asked the question. I'm looking at you. I see you. You're here for a reason. You're here because you deserve to be here. You're here because we need you to be here. Science needs everyone. Science, when we talk about a diversity of voices, that is the reality. If there's no debate, if there's no discussion, if there's no different perspectives, what are we gonna be doing the same experiment over and over? You are meant to be here. You're meant to be here today. You're meant to be part of the Leadership Alliance. You're meant to become a science professional or whatever your field is, if that's what you want. Remember that. Remember also that everybody messes up. And I'm glad that I caught myself. I am a bit of a potty mouth, so I will ask for forgiveness now in case one of them comes out. But everybody messes up. Everybody messes up in a class. Everybody gets a C or a D here and there. Everybody messes up an experiment. Thankfully, I didn't create an explosion I haven't created an explosion in any of my labs, but I got very close ones. Everybody says, without thinking too hard, answers a question with the most dumb answer. That happens to everyone. Don't let it detract you. It's gonna happen. Absorb it, feel it, learn from it, and move on. I have experienced it, and particularly when I was in industry, I did experience it during that time, particularly a lot, also towards the end of my PhD. At the beginning of my PhD, because again, I'm a total nerd, and my first year classes, I took molecular genetics in Puerto Rico with Martinez Cruzado. I took biochemistry with Ramirez. So University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, my education was top notch. And so I came into grad school, and it's not that I aced everything, but I felt confident. So that after that first year, imposter syndrome, please, I'm good. Then came the time to qualify. And that's when reality sinks. That's when you're there with your committee and you feel this big, and you feel that everything you say, and they ask you a question and you answer, is like, well, actually, that's not what I asked. And not only that, your answer is wrong. And it will beat you up. The process is designed a little bit to beat you up. The way that you get over it is, no one told me that at the moment. The qualifiers are the hardest part of your PhD. It's actually not the defense, it's the qualifiers. Mm-hmm. So you want to be aware that you're there for a reason. You are there because you're meant to there. You're there because you deserve there. And after all, no matter what, it's not how you got in, it's how you got out.
Yeah, and I would just say, after, when you get out and when you're defending, I feel like that for me was so validating, because I, from then on, thought to myself, if I could stand up in front of all of these PIs and experts that have created pharmaceuticals and have patents and have grilled me on all of my research for 3 years, then I can stand up in front of anyone. And so I feel like that definitely helped me when making the transition to my professional life. Because now when I get up in front of an audience, I always reflect back because I was so nervous and scared. And I'm always like, okay, well, I did that, so I can do this. So kind of moving back into that, the pipeline, in moving into more of a professional role, we have another question from a student that wants to know what it's like to work in biotech versus academia. How does it compare?
All right, I'm going to backtrack a little, if you allow me, and let me tell you the story of how I ended up in industry. It wasn't so much on purpose as the opportunity presented itself at the right time. After my PhD, I went to do a postdoc. How I ended up in the postdoc is a whole different story, but if you look on the Leadership Alliance website, it's on video. You can look it up. The lab where I ended up in my postdoc, I also ended up in that lab by chance. And it became a family. It's still my academic, my science family. It was a big lab. It was mostly postdocs. During that time, I was so extremely comfortable. I was among all these brilliant people that made me feel even more special because I was part of this special community. Our PI, our mentor, Roberto Coulter, took pride on selecting people for his lab that would fit the culture, that would do well in the lab. And the opportunity to be in that lab was very free. And you pick your project, and once you leave the lab, if you go into academia, no one can touch anything related for it for 2 years. So you get a chance to establish yourself. Everyone has a voice when somebody comes to interview for the postdoc. I was in heaven. I was going every day. I was these amazing conversations about not just what we're doing, but the future of science. These conversations about the role of bacteria, not just in disease, but as in the world. How do they impact weather? How do they impact industry? How do they impact everything? And I was so happy and so lost at the same time. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I did know, and I was certainly convinced that I did not want to become a faculty member in a tenure track position and an R01 institution. The reason why I went to the PhD is because one of my mentors, Dr. Joel Oppenheim, told me that when I told him that I didn't know if I wanted to do a postdoc, you have to do a postdoc because that's when you discover what type of scientist you are. And he was right. I knew I was a scientist, but I didn't know what type of science I could do. There's different, just like there's different fields, there's different ways to think about research. There's different ways to think about science. And doing that opportunity allowed me to see that the type of scientist I am is one that I don't have that a laser focus on a topic. I don't have a laser focus where I cannot stop thinking about being the first one to answer a question. I don't have that. My science superpower is figuring out how to develop techniques to solve questions that no one has solved before. The technique, not the question. So I kept getting involved in all these projects. I would come up with this idea for a new technique that no one has done, and we're gonna clone this and put it here. And 6 months later, here's the strain, you just have to do this. Oh, so you're gonna, I don't care anymore, you take it. Those 2 years were the most, allowed me to learn so much of myself. They were not very productive. I didn't get a single first author paper. Because also I didn't care that much. It wasn't gonna go into industry. So when the time came about to renew my funding, I was talking to Roberto and I told him, I said, well, I'm not gonna go into faculty. I don't know what I want to do. And he told me, okay, you have 3 months left of funding. And we just applied for an F32, F33 for you so that you can stay and finish this, and actually decide what your project is after 2 years and actually finish something. So I'm gonna give you those 3 months for you to figure it out. We're gonna close down all your projects, hand out everything to somebody else. You have those 3 weeks, you have access to my full network and you have access to everyone in the lab. Whoever you need to meet, whoever you need to know, whoever, if you need a contact or a company, you tell me and we will help you get filled. You're gonna spend those 3 months exploring different careers for you. I knew that I had taught at John Jay before when I was a grad student. I knew I liked that, but since I realized that what I like is developing techniques, what I like is figuring out how to answer the question, not so much what the question is. And I had met a few people from industry. I figured, okay, I'm gonna go into industry. A week after we set up on that process of me going to meet everyone that I could, Roberto gets a phone call from a guy he had just finished his PhD, like 2 years before, him and his team had won a competition for funding, for angel funding from a venture capital firm. And they had some money to start this company and they had just called Roberto. We want a grad student or postdoc that is crazy enough to come with a company that doesn't have any funds. We can pay him for three or 4 months at his current postdoc salary. We have no health insurance. We have no benefits. We just got a bench and a half. We don't even have pipettes, but we want someone that works in this and does this, which was what I was doing. I worked on this. I worked looking at the way that bacteria form biofilms, and someone that is good at developing techniques. And as you can guess, I was crazy enough to go and interview for the position, and I got it. I was employee number 1 of a company called Novophage, later called Sample 6, now called something else. I lost track. They no longer do anything related to what we did back in the day. During that time, those first couple of months, oh God, I didn't have pipettes. I had to borrow equipment from the lab. We took a trip through the basements of MIT and we borrowed equipment that was commissioned. I was working with expired reagents. And those couple of months, the 3 months that they gave me a fund, that they had a funding, my goal was I had to develop a model that would prove, very basic, with no money, no equipment, stuff that we got on eBay, to prove that, to do a proof of concept so that investors would see that this can potentially work and they would give us money. That was the goal. That's what they hired me. I wasn't going to be hired after that. I was going to go back to the lab and use that experience to then find another job. And I did it. We did it. I had to learn how to speak to investors. By the way, if you end up in industry and you end up talking to investors as a scientist, they love it when you geek out. They love it when you talk big science. They get completely, oh my God, this person obviously knows what they're talking about. And they love it when you completely geek out too. And we got, I think it was 2 million to start, and we started the company. And I got, although my 2 years in my postdoc were not very productive in terms of, although I did a lot, but I didn't have any papers, my 2.5 years in industry were extremely productive in science, because in science, what you do is focus on what is going to be the answer. How do I get to answer that is product as soon as possible, as cheap as possible, and without it needing to be perfect. Particularly at that stage, if you're working in industry and working with human treatments or therapeutics, this doesn't apply. I'm talking at startups and early start companies. The goal is to get to product. So here's the problem. They gave me the problem. How do I design an experiment, a protocol, a technique to prove that this works, to move the product further so that we can potentially at some point start making money. In academia, on the other hand, when you're an academic researcher, it's all about the question. The lab techs and the grad students take care of answering it. As a PI, your job is to write proposals, to stay on top of and to come up with the question. Your focus is the question. How do I find that question that no one has asked? If your frame of mind around science is like that, an academic career might be for you. If what you like, what excites you is, forget about the question. What I want to do is figure out how to answer it. How do I sit down for a week trying to figure out who has done what and how can I adapt that experiment somebody did 15 years ago with the technology that there's now? Then a career in industry might be for you.
Thank you. So building upon that, someone asked, what fundamental skills translated for you into both fields, since you've worked in both academia and in industry? And what were some of the hardships that you have overcome in industry and academia?
I'm gonna hit that one first because it ties up to the imposter syndrome thing. In industry, understanding racism and understanding discrimination was not easy for me at the beginning when I moved. Why? I'm a Puerto Rican that grew up in Puerto Rico. I did not have the experience of being a minority growing up. When I went to grad school, I went to NYU, which was, and you were there during that time, it was like a freaking Noah's Ark. Every color, every culture, everything was there. And it was New York City. You get to see everything. You get to learn everything. Moving in Boston into industry, I was the only person of color in the company. I was the only person with an accent. I was the only person that wasn't tall and white. I was the only queer person in the company. I was the only, there were many onlys that I was during that time. And that's really when I started noticing, and it took me a while, not just the imposter syndrome, that one, after they trusted us with $2 million, I got over it. But the microaggressions, the little things about how I mispronounced a word, the fact that sometimes, and this is something, it took me a while to discover what it is. I'm in a meeting and I bring an idea and maybe I didn't put it forward as well. I didn't express it as well as somebody else. but okay, this is the idea. Okay. Then somebody else said, oh, well, I have this idea, but that's exactly what I just said. But they get the credit. Okay, is it that I don't know how to speak? How is it? It took me a while to figure out that that just happens, that when you have an accent, when you don't sound like what everyone else does, it can affect the way that people perceive you. Thankfully, this is now part of the general conversation. Thankfully now, particularly now, and particularly this summer, we're starting to really talk about it. And a lot of people that are not part of a minority are actually listening. So I'm hopeful for the future, but that was one of the first things that, that was a hardship for me. The other one was adapting to the lifestyle. In industry, depends on the type of company. If you go to an established company, you're gonna have great benefits. You're gonna have, plenty of annual leave. When you're in a startup, it's the company, then the company, you eat in the company, they give you breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You're expected to be there on weekends, you have no life. And I've always liked my personal life. I always like on the weekends, I don't do anything. That's when I clean. That's when I pull out the mop. That's when I catch up on TV. That's when I, put blue goop on my hair so that it doesn't look like it's fading. So that was very, very hard for me. The expectation that even after there was this whole thing like, Edgardo leaves early, he leaves at 6 p.m. It's like, what the hell? It's 6 p.m. I'm done. Do you want me to stay here and look at your face? There's nothing else for me to do right now. I cannot make the bacteria grow faster. So moving from the industry environment where it's so relaxed to a corporate environment in a startup was striking, but thankfully, because I was employee number one, I knew all the leadership teams. When it was just a small group of us, I went to drinks with the CEO. We met. I cooked barbecue for the COO and the CFO. I knew the ins and outs of the budget, even though people above me didn't understand how the company financial structure works. So I had that, and I had people that were there through the history of the company that I could rely on, and they helped me adapt to that new environment. So again, something that I hope you noticed throughout, the way to learn in new environments is to develop your own community, develop your own family. I still talk to the former CEO. We trade, he sends me pictures of his kids and I send him pictures of my cats. It's a matter of building those relationships. And that is one of the things that has really helped me on both industry, both in academia and in biotech, is networking, meeting people. Don't be shy. Everyone's shy. I'm actually shy. People don't believe me. I don't like meeting new people. I force myself to. I don't like speaking in public. This whole Zoom thing is awesome because I don't have an audience in front of me, so I can't pretend that I'm just talking to Thais. But I am quite shy, and I taught myself, get over it. You have to, you need to be able to be comfortable in front of an audience. You need to be comfortable talking to anyone. I am still, and you see it, I will talk to any scientist. If they have, I don't care if they have a Nobel Prize. I don't care if they're a grad student just started. I'm happy to sit down, talk to them, and geek out. Talking to somebody else outside, I'm not like that. So you have to get out there and really learn how to network, really learn how to maintain your network. I'm also not very good at that. I always forget to contact my mentor throughout my PhD, and also Roberto through my postdoc. But that's something that you have to do. Keep them afoot of what you're doing. This is what I'm doing now. If you're changing to a new job, let them know, look, I'm working on this now. Do you know anyone on that business? Ask. Networking is transactional. It's not just you about you meeting people. It's about you knowing someone that knows someone. And by asking someone, hey, do you know someone in this industry? Can you introduce me? You're giving them capital. Now you owe that person a favor. So they're gonna come back at you, hey, you met someone from this other company. Can you introduce me? So see networking as a transactional. You build your credit by being courteous and being a good networking and being able to establish connections for yourself and also for other people.
Absolutely. We talked about that last week. And, you know, one of the things I feel like if people are nervous, the best network that you have is your peers. Because again, you never know where those folks are going to end up. You might end up calling them to say, hey, I noticed that you're at X company now. Do you know anyone in your company looking to hire, you know, scientists like me? Or they might reach back out to you. So it's very important to cultivate those relationships, even if it's someone who's a peer in your current network. So absolutely. So we have another question from a Puerto Rican student who wants to go to grad school on the U.S. mainland, but also, you know, wants to eventually return to Puerto Rico to give back to the academic community and to jumpstart initiatives on the island in order to foster a culture of research, innovation, and development. As you may all know, Puerto Rico is in desperate need of new ideas and sustainable and equitable economic development after so many natural and political disasters. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to pursue an education on the mainland and then go and give back to the Puerto Rican community?
It's not easy, so be prepared. Don't rush it, and start building a network with both here in the States and also with Puerto Ricans in the diaspora and Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico. Here's one again. I opened a bunch of windows of stuff that I wanted to share with you guys throughout. Ciencia Puerto Rico. By the way, half of the team that built Ciencia Puerto Rico are Leadership Alliance alumni. Just saying. Ciencia Puerto Rico, when I started grad school, they started Ciencia Puerto Rico when I started grad school, and it was just a networking thing for Puerto Ricans in the doing science in the States to get to know each other, because we were all over. And it has grown from that into not just a resource for scientists here in the States, but also for Puerto Rico. They do have projects in the island. They have developed this. They have gotten grants. They have gotten grants to bring in and improve science education in Puerto Rico. So if you're seeing, like, Giovanna is Leadership Alliance. So yeah, it's like, I love it. These networks by now are like family to me. So get in it, try to get involved. They're always looking for volunteers. They're always looking for people to write stories for them for their blog. They're always looking for people to help them make connections in the mainland. After Maria, it was Ciencia Puerto Rico who got together and started sending emails and created networks so that scientists in Puerto Rico could send the samples to be stored in the States, because they didn't have power. They didn't know when power was going, and power was not it wasn't very reliant for months. So they got together. Everybody. I tried to get a freezer in John Jay. They sadly, the one freezer that they offered me broke in the same week, so I wasn't able to, but everybody just got in, and through the Science Puerto Rico, we were able to make sure that years of science in Puerto Rico didn't get lost because we were out of power. Also, stay tuned. Start also developing your network now. Start talking to faculty there, and faculty, they always have contacts in industry. They always know. There are startups in Puerto Rico. There's not that many, and they so it might be a possibility. So build up that network now while you're there, which is something I didn't do. What else? Make sure that you come up with creative ideas. Make sure that if your goal is to become an academic and go to teach at one of the universities in Puerto Rico, then, you know, start talking to your faculty, ask them what type of publication record do you look for in new candidates, what fields are now in demand? What do you think they're going to be in demand in 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 years when I finish? There are the university, particularly the private ones, Universidad Interamericana and UMET are really doing amazing science now. It used to be all about UPR. The private universities in Puerto Rico are actually really kicking butt. So look into those positions too. Start thinking of a plan now so that as you gather opportunities throughout your education and as you do your PhD, you have what you very likely will need to return to Puerto Rico.
Okay. This is another question from a student at University of Puerto Rico at Ponce. I don't know what's happening, but I think all of our attendees tonight are from UPR. So this question is, coming from Puerto Rico, did you ever feel that the culture in the science field, both in PR and the US, is one in which you have to know someone in order to advance in the field? If so, how did you overcome this? So we talked about this a little bit, but do you feel like you need to know people in order to move ahead?
A lot of scientists rely on their science and they think that their science is enough. My science is awesome. My ideas are amazing. Sadly, that's not how the world works. And it's not so much about being Puerto Rican or being part of a minority group or being, I put it this way, white people networking. So we have to, you have to make sure that you build those relationships. It's not so much about who you know, because if you might know 20 Nobel Prize winners, but if you're a D-bag, they're not good. You can know so many people. That doesn't mean they're gonna wanna help you. You wanna make sure that they wanna help you. You wanna establish good, solid, honest relationship with colleagues. You want to make sure that not every collaboration is only about what they're contributing to your career, is what you are together contributing to science, and also how you can help other people. So it's not so much about who you know, it's about making sure that those relationships and the people that you know are solid, that they can really vouch for you, that they will think of you when you have that opportunity. As I mentioned, networking at its core is transactional. It's not just about who you know, it's also who knows you. Mm-hmm. Let me give an example of networking. That company that I I didn't help found it because the idea wasn't mine, but I helped it establish. I worked there for 3 years. And it was, oh my God, it was 10 years ago, September 9, 2010. No, it wasn't 10 years ago. It was September 9, 2013. I got laid off. I didn't get fired. It took me a while to learn the difference, but the company had shifted to a different direction. They didn't really need me. They kept me for about 6 months, trying me out for a whole different position for which I had no reason to be in that position. And the new CEO was giving them pushback. He's like, okay, Edgardo, he's awesome. He's a great person, but we don't need someone with his expertise anymore. He was great when we started and we needed to develop the product. We have a product now. We need to go and sell it. So they let me go. The week after, I pretty much sat on my couch. We bought a new couch like 2 years ago, but there's a cushion in my old couch that had a depression. You could still see it where I sat straight for a whole week. My now husband had to feed me, make sure I went and bathed while he was still in school. It was a complete shock to the system. And after that, when I processed it, I have to figure this out. That's when I started. And you could argue that is in part that I was able to find other opportunities based on who I knew. I saw that the largest venture capital firm in Boston had a fellowship program for scientists that wanted to learn more about working in venture capital. The application process had ended months ago. That didn't stop me. I called my PI for my postdoc. He's like, hey, I know you know this guy on that firm. send them an email and tell them about me. That company had actually considered funding Novophage. So I went back to my former boss. Hey, you just let me go, so you're gonna help me on the next step. So call him and tell him who I am and how he should reconsider, because I'm about to email him and ask him for an exception to get into that fellowship. I didn't know the person. This guy called Geoff Van, yeah, I cannot pronounce it. I'm not even gonna try. This guy, so I used my network to get the meeting so that I could get the next opportunity. Then that fellowship lasted for 3 months. I helped start a company that's now called, it used to be called Symbiota, and now it's called Indigo Agriculture. They're revolutionizing the agribusiness. I helped them write about 70 patents in a week. I am in none of those patents, sadly. Because in my role, I didn't have right to demand part of the IP. But it was a great experience. It also showed me that, you know what, I can do this if I want. At the same time, my now husband had a conference in New York, and I went and I called a friend. When I was in grad school, he was a postdoc in the lab of one of my best friends. And we really clicked. We became good friends, and we both love Broadway. And because when you're part of the, back in the day, when you were part of the summer program at NYU, they would ask you to go they would ask you to be the part of the summer programs as a grad student, be one of the, that's how I know Thais originally. And so that would mean that our dean would always take us every year to 1 or 2 Broadway shows. So I would make sure, okay, Joel, do you have extra tickets? Okay, let's invite this postdoc. He's a total Broadway geek like me, so let's bring him. We built a really good relationship. So my husband had that conference. It was in November 2013, and I asked him, hey, can I crash in your couch? Can we crash in your couch? By the way, I just got laid off, so we're coming down like on a Thursday. I know that you haven't seen me in years, but we're hanging out. So I came down, and he was telling me, oh, well, I jumped a step. When, after his postdoc, he started working as a faculty member at John Jay. He's still there. His name is Nathan Lentz. And he wanted someone to teach. He was just introducing a new way to teach biology, where students that came in with no science from high school would take what they call PACE biology. They would split the first semester in 2 semesters, and then they would catch up during the summers. And so he wanted someone to teach the lab to that first cohort. And he told me, he's like, oh, well, do you know someone? I can do it. Let me talk to him. I know that we're not supposed to teach because we are all funded by the NIH. We're not supposed to have another job outside the institution, but let me talk to my PI. My PI knew that I was always more interested in the education part of academia. So he told me, sure, as long as it doesn't interfere with your postdoc. I'm sorry, with your research. It did interfere. I ended up graduating a year later because of this, but I don't regret it. So I went a few years later, I got laid off, and I stayed with him, and we went out while my husband was away on a conference, I went out drinking with him, and he starts telling me, he's like, remember, when you started, I had gotten together with another faculty member, and we started this program to start doing research experience for undergrads at John Jay. Back in the day, John Jay, right now we're in a nice fancy building. I know that I have 3 or 4 of my students in the audience. They've only known the new building. Back then, we were in what we lovingly call the shoe factory, because it was a building where it was a shoe factory back in the 60s. The labs, oh my God, the research lab were like closets where they had stuck a bench in there and a couple of equipment. It was nothing like what is now. And it was because Nathan and my now boss, Anthony Carpi, who's now the Dean of Research, started this program and started taking advantage of the fact that we're a Hispanic serving institution to find funds and build up a culture of science, of scientific research at John Jay. This was in 2007, by 2013, the program was established. It was well funded, and the next step was to institutionalize the program. So the college had committed, we're going to give you funds to hire someone that's not attached to the grants, someone that will be a staff in the program. And that will be an academic advisor for the students, and maybe help them with their resume, and maybe help you guys with the budget. And they received hundreds of applications. And Nathan told me, it's like, we have this position. I know that you used to do this with the Leadership Alliance. I know you're still active in SACNAS. And I know that you stay in touch with people that do this. Do you know someone? Okay, give me the job description. Yeah, no, that's me. That's mine. That's it. No, don't worry, I got it. I applied. And when I applied, and again, it's because I knew Nathan, and I kept a good network relationship with him. Even though our career paths differed, I went into industry, went fully into academia, I decided to maintain a good we still maintain a good relationship. And thankfully, they received hundreds of applications. Most of them were not really what they were looking. They were looking for an advisor, an academic advisor that knew a little bit of science. And on my cover letter, I started with basically writing how I used to be like their students, and how a program like that had changed my life. And then to get the job, and here I know that Mediva is online, and I use my network, and I called Mediva, I called Big Ganeda, I called Joel Oppenheim, and okay, here is the list of emails of people that are deciding who they're going to hire. Can you send them an unwarranted cold email about how amazing I am? And that definitely put me over the threshold. Even though I wasn't what they were looking, they realized that I come with a built-in network of people in this side of the industry, and that definitely helped me.
Yes, and thank you so much, Edgardo, for that. And I also just want to add that obviously I'm biased because I'm a Leadership Alliance alumni, and now I work for the Leadership Alliance. However, you know, I would just encourage this community to keep signing up and participating in programs like these, because these are the programs and the information that are going to allow you to build your network so that you can have those opportunities. So thank you so much, Edgardo, for our conversation this evening. We had so many questions we weren't able to get to. So I'm going to ask Sam Anderson to send you those questions if you have time, or perhaps if you can share your email, because I know we have a lot of students that were looking for you to reach out. So I'm going to leave it there. But again, thank you so much for your time. And just I can plug in my network. You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect. And also on, hold on, I can send messages here. Yeah, all panelists and attendees. I am on social media, and I'm only on Twitter. Feel free to follow me. I'm on LinkedIn. And if you have questions, send them to me, and we can, John Jay is paying now for the Cadillac of Zoom for us, so I can get on the, I'm happy to have those conversations with you guys. All right, thank you so much, and thank you to our audience for joining us this evening. Take care.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.